Welcome to the deep dive. Today we've got a really specific mission, and it's really for you, the learner.
Right.
You're at that point where, you spent years on grammar, you've built a solid vocabulary, you can understand pretty much anything, but something's still missing.
There's a gap.
There's a gap. You're trying to get past that textbook feel and get to real linguistic fluidity.
And that gap, that space between, say, a C1 and a true C2 level, it's usually less about big grammar rules and more about, social nuance.
Okay.
It's the difference between just being understood and sounding genuinely comfortable. We sometimes call that the Max and Mia ceiling, from the old textbooks.
Right. Where the language is functional, but it doesn't have that weight.
Exactly. It lacks the social weight, the sophisticated command of register.
So we're basically looking for the cheat codes, the little linguistic switches that can immediately elevate standard English. And to do that, we're digging into some fantastic source material. We've got 6 common daily interactions, bus stop, pharmacy, that kind of thing, that have been intentionally upgraded from standard English to, peak advanced dialogue.
And our goal is to really extract the precise vocabulary, the complex sentence structures, and the idioms that signal that deep command.
So what are we looking for specifically? What defines C2 for our purposes today?
I think we can boil it down to 4 core elements we'll be tracking. First, precision. So choosing the exact right word. Second is formality, knowing when to dial up the register.
Okay.
Third is nuance, which is using language to kind of acknowledge these subtle social complexities. And finally, abstraction effortlessly using things like metaphors and idioms.
And what's really interesting, and I think this is critical, is that this kind of C2 language, it isn't just about showing off your vocabulary.
Not at all.
It's about, and this is a key theme, social risk management.
Yes. A more precise word or a more formal structure can soften a request, or make a critique sound more objective, or even make an interruption feel more polite.
So it shows respect for the conversation itself.
Exactly. We're moving beyond asking, where is the bus? To, expressing complex frustration about urban infrastructure.
Or going from my head hurts to
describing your symptoms with clinical precision. This is a deep dive into the language of, adult comfort and confidence.
All right, let's get into it. Let's start with a place most of us feel high-stakes stress. The daily grind, the commute.
The pressure cooker.
Exactly. It's a perfect environment to analyze this because you have time pressure, frustration, inconvenience. It's all there. And it's a great space to look at not just complaining, but actual critique.
And how a person expresses frustration is, I think, a huge benchmark for linguistic sophistication. A basic speaker might just use simple, direct words.
This is bad, I'm angry.
Right. But the advanced speaker, they frame that frustration inside a contextual framework.
Yeah.
They use elevated vocabulary to stay civil, even when they're, deeply annoyed.
Okay, so our first scene is the bus stop. There's a delay. The first interaction we see immediately sets a different tone. Instead of a direct question, the passenger uses this incredibly complex structure. They say, "You wouldn't happen to have any intel on the schedule, would you?"
That phrase it's a linguistic onion. There's so much packed in there.
Let's peel it back. Start with the word choice. Intel.
Okay, so intel obviously comes from intelligence, like military or security. But using it colloquially here is so significant. It implies that this isn't just data. It's critical, high value, maybe even hard to get information.
So it elevates a simple bus schedule to something more strategic.
Precisely. It's that abstraction principle in action. They're treating the timetable like it's a military briefing.
Okay, but what about the grammar? That whole that you wouldn't happen to have phrasing. It feels so polite, it's almost backwards.
It is. And that's pure C2 level social engineering. It's a double negative, it's a complex conditional, and it's all designed to do one thing: maximize politeness and minimize the feeling of imposition.
How so?
By asking if the person doesn't have the intel, you're giving them a really easy out. A simple, "No, I don't," feels completely fine. There's no guilt for not knowing.
I see. So you're managing the social risk of interrupting a stranger. The basic way is just, do you know the schedule?
Exactly. The advanced speaker bakes deference and politeness right into the syntax of the question itself.
That's fascinating. The complexity is like a shield. Okay, so now let's look at how they describe the actual bad service. The wait time is described as what feels like an eternity, and the bus service itself is called notoriously erratic lately.
Eternity is classic hyperbole. It's a very emotional word, but conveys the speaker's internal feeling of wasted time without them having to, shout or sound angry. It's controlled intensity.
And I love the pairing notoriously erratic. Erratic on its own is a great, precise word. Unpredictable, irregular, but adding notoriously completely transforms the complaint. Why is that word so important here? What makes it such a C2 signal?
Because it shifts the whole frame. It's no longer a personal complaint about this one time. Notoriously means this poor performance is widely known. It's a recognized flaw, a shared cultural burden.
So it's like saying, you and I both know this bus is always late.
Exactly. It creates an instant rapport. It signals to the other person, I get it, I understand this system and its reputation, not just this one failure. It's an incredibly concise, high-level way to analyze institutional failure.
Wow. It turns complaining into a kind of linguistic collaboration.
It does.
And that leads right into the language of urgency. The speaker says they're pressed for time because of a high-stakes meeting at 9:00 sharp.
Press for time is such an elegant, established idiom. It sounds measured, but it conveys real urgency. And that connects back to that idea of maintaining formality even when you're under stress.
And high-stakes meeting is key, isn't it? It's not just, I'm late for work.
It's crucial. It elevates the importance of the situation. It justifies the intensity of their frustration to the person they're talking to. It gives the annoyance, context, and legitimacy.
And then they admit their plan was flawed using this financial metaphor. I was banking on this being a smooth commute, which leads to them saying, I'm starting to second guess that strategy.
This is a beautiful example of that abstraction we talked about. Banking on implies heavy reliance. Implicit trust, it's a metaphor from finance.
Right.
And applying that high-level concept to a mundane bus schedule. It just shows that the speaker can effortlessly integrate abstract thought into casual conversation.
And second guess that strategy. I mean, they're using vocabulary from corporate planning to talk about catching a bus.
Exactly. A basic speaker says, I made a bad choice. The advanced speaker analyzes their own strategic process.
I love that. And the conversation then uses that analysis to build a connection. They say they're in the same boat and then make this observation that Mondays are invariably a nightmare for gridlock.
Oh, invariably is such a powerful adverb. It means always, without exception. But it sounds so much more formal and analytical than just saying Mondays are always bad.
And gridlock. That's the proper technical term, isn't it?
It is. It's the precise term for severe traffic congestion. So they're not just gossiping about traffic, they're analyzing urban infrastructure patterns using precise formal language. It's elevated small talk.
And it closes with this little bit of polite worry. Let's just keep our fingers crossed that it's not standing room only.
Yeah, and that phrase uses a specific metaphor from, a crowded theater or a concert. It's a very descriptive, polite way to express hope for minimal discomfort. It shows they're already thinking ahead to the next phase of the miserable journey. The whole exchange is about using complex language to manage a really frustrating situation with total civility.
So after dissecting the pressure of time, let's pivot. Let's go to another high-pressure environment where precision is everything. Describing your symptoms at a pharmacy. Here, the register is going to shift completely. We're moving from frustrated but colloquial analysis to something much more clinical and formal.
This scenario is the perfect test for C2 level precision. When you're talking to a health professional, vague language just doesn't cut it. And the advanced speaker respects that immediately.
They don't just walk up and say, hey, got anything for a headache?
No, they use that highly formal opener. I was wondering if I could consult you briefly.
The word consult is doing a lot of work there.
A huge amount. It defines the entire interaction as a professional, expert to non-expert exchange. It validates the pharmacist's role, and that respect is transmitted linguistically right from the start.
And then the patient uses this very sophisticated specificity. It's not just a bad headache, it's a splitting headache that just won't subside.
Let's break that down.
Okay.
Splitting is a powerful, high-impact adjective. We all know what that feels like.
Yeah.
But the verb subside, that's the key. Why is knowing that verb so important for C2 mastery here?
I imagine it's about the duration of the pain.
Exactly. It speaks directly to duration and prognosis. If pain won't subside, it means the problem is persistent. It's lasting longer than you'd expect for just a minor discomfort. It gives the pharmacist crucial data.
And they add that the pain is lingering.
Right, another duration marker. It's not temporary, it's persistent. and needs to be dealt with.
So the pharmacist then probes for even more detail, asking if it's a throbbing pain or more of a dull pressure. And the patient is able to specify that it's concentrated right behind the eyes.
And those are highly technical adjectives for describing a physical feeling. A C2 learner has to know the difference between throbbing, that pulsating rhythmic pain, and dull, that sort of low intensity, heavy pressure.
And being able to specify the location concentrated right behind the eyes, that's vital clinical precision.
It is. If you can't use these specific descriptive words, your English is really capped at a lower level of functional utility, especially in a medical setting.
The pharmacist then immediately uses clinical language back, suggesting a tension headache and that it's likely stress-induced. And this is where that specific medical vocabulary just enters the conversation so seamlessly.
And then you see that crucial formality in the instructions. The pharmacist checks for known drug allergies or any existing medication.
And it's not, are you allergic to anything? It's the formal technical term.
Always. Then the pharmacist's instructions, they're just a gold mine of this high-level C2 register. They talk about dosage, taking it as required, and then that very strong warning, do ensure you don't exceed 4 in a 24-hour window.
That do ensure, it's so much stronger than just make sure.
It is. It's a formal, forceful imperative. It really conveys the seriousness of the instruction. And then they add that critical formal caveat. Strictly speaking, you should take it with food to avoid gastric irritation.
Strictly speaking kind of sets up a non-negotiable rule, and gastric irritation is the precise medical term for an upset stomach. Why not just say upset stomach?
Because gastric irritation is unambiguous, it's professional, it maintains the high register of the consultation, and it eliminates any confusion that might come from more common, vague terms. In a medical context, ambiguity creates risk.
And C2 precision minimizes that risk.
Perfectly put.
Finally, there's a secondary concern. The patient mentions a scratchy throat, and the pharmacist recommends lozenges that have a mild anesthetic effect to soothe the irritation.
And again, just notice the technicality. It's not just that they help, they soothe the irritation with a mild anesthetic effect. An advanced speaker is expected to understand and use these kinds of descriptive, technical terms about function. The whole interaction just shows that C2 proficiency often requires subject-specific vocabulary, even in these everyday situations.
The theme is always precision, minimal ambiguity.
Always.
Okay, so we've covered pressure, urgency, medical precision. Let's shift gears now into the social domain. This is where the C2 challenge is all about managing rapport and formality at the same time.
Right, and the coffee shop is a perfect example. It's a low-stakes environment, but it demands a high degree of social fluidity.
So this section will probably focus more on, what? Nuance and idioms.
Exactly. Heavy on nuance and idiomatic expression. It's all about using shared language and metaphors to build connection and express more complex feelings, like exhaustion or pleasure.
So the scene opens with someone running into an acquaintance, and the greeting itself shows immediate grammatical elevation.
What a pleasant surprise running into you here. You're looking well, albeit a bit frazzled.
The word albeit is such a fantastic signal of advanced grammar.
It's not a word you hear every day.
No, it's a formal conjunction. It basically means although. And to just drop it smoothly into a casual chat like that, it instantly raises the linguistic register. It lets the speaker give a compliment, "You're looking well," while immediately adding a gentle, observant caveat. A bit frazzled.
It's a beautifully nuanced little package.
It is, a compliment and an observation in one. And the response takes that observation and just runs with it, using idiomatic intensity. Frazzled is an understatement, and then that classic high-level idiom, burning the candle at both ends.
That idiom is the perfect example of abstraction. It means working way too long, starting early, finishing late, just exhausting yourself.
Right.
A C2 speaker doesn't just say, "I'm tired, I worked a lot." They use this visual historical metaphor, a candle literally burning from both ends, to convey the unsustainable intensity of their exhaustion.
And they clearly need a fix. They need a pick-me-up. And I love the slightly dark, playful way they ask about the drink choice. Have you decided on your poison yet?
Yeah, calling it poison is this self-deprecating, funny reference to how addictive caffeine is. It adds a bit of levity and establishes an instant relaxed rapport. It's a sign that the speaker is comfortable enough with the language to really play with it.
Okay, now for the coffee order itself. The desired qualities go so far beyond, "I want a large coffee." The speaker needs something robust to kickstart my brain, but at the same time is craving something indulgent.
The vocabulary there is so specific. Robust is a sensor descriptor. It means strength and richness of flavor, not just that it's strong. And indulgent signals this desire for luxury, for a self-reward. They're using sensory and emotional language to describe a simple drink.
It shows a really high level of descriptive ability.
It does.
And the recommendations they get are just as elevated. The house blend is exquisite, and the cappuccino is arguably the best in the city.
And that use of arguably is such a subtle but powerful C2 move.
Why?
Because it doesn't state it as a fact. It frames the opinion as a matter of informed, debatable consensus. It adds this intellectual weight to a simple coffee review. It's a conversational hedge that shows sophistication, even when you're just talking about a cappuccino.
And this level of detail works. It prompts the decision, which is confirmed with another high-level idiom, "You've twisted my arm."
Classic. It signals a playful defeat, a fun way to agree. It's so much more interesting than a boring, okay, we'll have one.
And they also grab a pastry to tide me over until lunch.
Such a great phrase. Tide me over. It means to sustain them temporarily. It's concise, evocative, and perfectly suited to the context.
Even the specific instruction to the barista is telling. A cappuccino, extra dry, if possible.
Yes, that's a marker of an expert consumer. Knowing that dry refers to the foam-to-milk ratio. It shows they have the technical vocabulary for these specific, knowledgeable transactions. That's functional C2 mastery in practice.
The conversation then pivots so effortlessly into shop talk, which I think is where a lot of learners can struggle to sound natural. The project update is so balanced and nuanced, chaotic to be honest, but incredibly rewarding. And they're in the final stretch.
That positive-negative duality, chaotic but rewarding, it shows maturity. Nuance in description, you're avoiding simple black and white statements.
Right.
And the academic update is even more precise, immersing myself in literature and breaking through a plateau.
What's the significance of breaking through a plateau in this context?
It's the perfect high-level phrase for overcoming a period where you feel stuck, where your skills aren't developing. It's understood in so many contexts of expertise. From sports to language learning, it shows the speaker is analytically aware of their own process.
And immersing myself is so much more active than just, I'm reading a lot.
It implies deep, focused engagement. Yes.
And they end with a sophisticated little toast. Here's to caffeine and productivity, a perfect high-energy close.
The perfect close.
Okay, so let's move from the frazzled social coffee shop to the more structured environment of a restaurant. Let's look at advanced service interactions.
In a service environment, especially one that feels a bit more high-end, the register has to be formal and really courteous. This is where we see the power of formality and very specific vocabulary. The diner, for example, asks to peruse the menu.
Peruse. That is the quintessential C2 word. It means to read something in a really thorough, careful way. But here's a question. If a learner starts using peruse all the time, do they risk sounding pretentious?
That's the absolute core of mastering register. And the answer is yes, they do.
Okay.
If you say, I was perusing the headlines on the bus, you're going to sound ridiculous. Peruse suggests focused, dedicated attention. It's perfect for a menu, a legal contract, a book. In the restaurant, it signals a sophisticated, unhurried approach. It respects the menu itself. So the risk of pretension is high if you overuse it, but its use here is suitable. That's the goal.
Suitability. Got it. The diner also has a quick query regarding the soup of the day. The formal choice of regarding is noticeable there. It maintains that respectful distance.
And the server responds with specialized high-end vocabulary. Today we're featuring a roasted tomato and basil bisque served with sourdough croutons.
Featuring is definitely high-end promo language. It's not just the soup is, it's we are highlighting this.
Exactly. And they use specific culinary terms like bisque, which shows a command of ingredient-specific language.
The diner's question about flavor is also very specific. Is the mustard sauce particularly spicy?
And the server's response is just a beautiful showcase of C2 descriptive language. Not at all. It's more of a tangy, whole-grain mustard without overwhelming the palate.
Overwhelming the palate. That is such clinical sensory language for a taste experience. Why is that so much better than just saying it's not too strong?
Because it's precise about the mechanism of the flavor. It conveys that the flavor profile is balanced, it's subtle, it's designed not to just dominate the whole experience. It elevates the conversation from just taste to, well, gastronomy. It signals to the diner that the kitchen is operating at a very thoughtful level.
And the diner is convinced. The response is just sold.
Yeah, a confident economic idiom, a very quick, efficient way to confirm a decision, and then, could I substitute the fries for a green salad? clear, confident direction. This isn't passive ordering, it's active engagement.
When the food arrives, the compliment is specific. It looks visually stunning.
And then the final assessment, the true marker of high praise. It was impeccable, thank you. The dressing on the salad was particularly refreshing.
Impeccable means flawless, perfect. It carries so much more weight than just very good.
A huge amount more. And particularly refreshing uses that intensive adverb to pinpoint a specific positive feeling. Cool, clean, reviving. This is the language of satisfaction, but delivered with real weight and precision.
Then when asking for the check, the diner uses that very formal, polite, self-effacing phrase, "Could I trouble you for the check?"
Could I trouble you? Is the classic epitome of politeness in these interactions. You're acknowledging that your request requires labor from the server.
Right.
And the server maintains that high register right to the end with the upsell. Can I tempt you with dessert? Our lemon tart is quite renowned. Tempt and renowned. Very elevated words. The diner agrees, adding a black coffee to settle the meal. A highly specific phrase for aid in digestion. Again, it's all about that specific language for function.
Okay, for our final section, let's focus on spatial and retail precision. So how to give and receive highly detailed technical instructions, whether you're lost in a city or hunting for ingredients in a store.
This requires a real command of the language of location and logistics.
Right.
These are the scenarios where vague vocabulary completely fails you. If you're lost, you need precision. If you're shopping for something specific, you need categorical accuracy. C2 mastery here means using the most specific noun or descriptive word you have.
So this scenario starts with the tourist establishing context and apologizing for the interruption, which, as we've said, is so crucial for social risk management. The tourist says, "I seem to have got myself a bit turned around," and gives the perfect excuse. "My phone battery just died on me, so I'm navigating blind, I'm afraid."
Got myself a bit turned around is such a polite, slightly passive way of saying, I'm lost. It avoids that harsh, direct admission.
Yeah.
And navigating blind is a sophisticated metaphor, probably from aviation or sailing, for lacking crucial information. It immediately makes the interruption feel legitimate.
And the locals' response is just as sophisticated. They normalize the error. The classic technology failed. Then they reassure them, "You're not far off the mark," and give the instruction, "You just need to reorient yourself."
Reorient yourself. That is high-level spatial vocabulary.
Yeah.
It means to adjust your position relative to your surroundings. It sounds so much more informed than figure out where you are.
Right. And "not far off the mark" is a great idiom for "you're close."
A great one.
Okay, now for the technical part, the directional language. The local uses very formal terms to describe the path. Continues straight along this trajectory for roughly 2 blocks.
Trajectory. I mean, that's a word from physics or ballistics, right?
Yeah.
The path of a moving object. Applying it to a simple street route shows an authoritative command of descriptive language. It suggests a clear, defined, predictable path.
And the landmarks are simple but clear. A massive supermarket.
Yes.
And the turns are phrased with a mix of formality and common idiom. Immediately past that structure, hang a right. The final road is called a thoroughfare, and the station is a straight shot from there.
Thoroughfare is the formal, almost architectural word for a main road. It shows an understanding of the urban plan. And then straight shot is the common, accessible idiom for a very direct, easy route. The C2 speaker can just weave the technical thoroughfare with the colloquial straight shot effortlessly.
And they confirm the distance with real precision. Not in the slightest. It's a brisk 10-minute walk, tops.
Tops, meaning at the maximum, no more than. It gives a clear upper limit, which is incredibly helpful. It shows accuracy. And then the local adds that crucial heads up. Make sure you grab a ticket before boarding. The conductors are quite strict.
So it's not just about directions. It's about social context and helping them prepare.
Exactly. It's a socially nuanced warning. It makes sure the tourist doesn't get into unexpected trouble, which makes the whole interaction even more helpful.
The final question is about proximity. Is there anywhere decent to grab a coffee in the vicinity of the station? And the answer uses the highest level of spatial vocabulary.
It really does. The local calls the station a transit hub. They locate the coffee spot in a quaint little kiosk right adjacent to the entrance.
Vicinity, adjacent to, transit hub, all much more technical and formal than near, next to, and train station.
This speaker has a real command of the sophisticated language of urban planning and space. It demonstrates true fluency in the language of logistics.
Our final scenario, the grocery store, is all about precision in identifying inventory and, again, managing polite interruptions in a retail setting. It's about getting specialized information.
And the shopper opens with that highly formal apologetic language we've seen before. It sets a tone of deference. Pardon me, I hate to interrupt, but I'm scouring the shelves for extra virgin olive oil, and I'm coming up empty-handed.
Scouring the shelves, that's so much more intense than just looking.
It is. It's an intensive verb phrase. It implies they've searched thoroughly, maybe even desperately. It justifies the interruption. And coming up empty-handed is the perfect idiom for a failed search.
The clerk then gives specific aisle navigation using precise, categorical retail language. They distinguish where the specialty items are, stocked right alongside the balsamic vinegars and specialty oils, and that the other item is in the refrigerated section with the dairy alternatives.
And that distinction is so important for a C2 learner.
Why?
Because in the real world, in professional or retail settings, you have to use the right categorical term. You don't ask for milk that isn't milk, you ask for a dairy alternative. These precise category descriptions are essential for functional adult conversations where classification and inventory really matter.
And the shopper explains their need, saying they're out of my element finding the ingredients for a lemon-infused pasta dish.
Out of my element, a key idiom. It means you're outside your area of expertise or comfort. It's a self-effacing way to admit you need help.
And the clerk responds with this incredibly high-level word for buying things. Have you managed to procure the produce yet?
Procure. It's the formal, active, almost business-like verb for acquisition. It is so much higher register than buy or get. It implies obtaining something through deliberate effort. Using these elevated verbs maintains a sense of professionalism even when you're talking about groceries.
The clerk then offers some quality assurance, calling the cherry tomatoes particularly ripe, and the shopper calls this excellent intel.
And we're back to intel. Bringing back that high-value information word, even for tomatoes, it reinforces that running theme. Helpful knowledge is treated like strategic information. It maintains that high register.
And then the final, completely relatable problem, inevitably left my tote bags in the car. And the clerk's response uses an essential idiom of shared human error. It happens to the best of us.
And that phrase just perfectly wraps up the interaction. It shows empathy, it normalizes the mistake, it demonstrates linguistic command of social connection, which is a huge part of C2 mastery. You have the knowledge, but you also have the emotional intelligence to use it in the right way. Hashtag outro, synthesizing mastery.
So we have dissected 6 incredibly rich scenarios. We've moved from urban stress and medical precision all the way to social elegance and logistical accuracy. If our listener, the learner, wants to internalize these upgrades, what's the single most critical strategy they should be focusing on?
It all comes down to conscious synonym selection based on context and social weight.
Okay.
C2 mastery is about choosing the word that carries more formality or more precision or greater social nuance. It's not just knowing 10 words for good. It's knowing that impeccable implies flawless execution, whereas, say, satisfactory implies it was just adequate.
The difference is all in the details.
It's all in the details and in the impact those details have on how your listener perceives your command of the language.
We saw some phenomenal high-impact vocabulary today. Words like peruse for reading, impeccable for excellent, notoriously for a bad reputation, and procure for buying.
And powerful idioms, too, like burning the candle at both ends for being exhausted, and that complex syntax of, you wouldn't happen to have any intel.
Using those choices, it just instantly shifts the perception of the speaker's English level from, say, capable to commanding.
Completely. These upgraded dialogues, they provide a blueprint for real-world adult conversations where ambiguity can be costly and a certain level of formality is often expected.
You know, I noticed a thread running through all 6 scenarios. The high-level language was often used not just to describe facts, but to soften social challenges.
Like what?
Like interrupting someone, or asking for a favor, or giving negative feedback about a bus service, or even admitting you made a planning mistake.
That is the narrative thread we were tracing. You've nailed it. It's social risk management.
Right.
Using that complex, high-register language, it shows respect for the interaction and for the other person. The phrasing, "Could I trouble you for the check?" is so much less abrasive than "Give me the bill."
And the formality of, "I was wondering if I could consult you briefly," makes the interruption completely acceptable.
So C2 language is deployed strategically to navigate the complexities of adult social life successfully.
This brings us back to the central challenge then. We've established that true C2 mastery isn't just about knowing these fancy words, but mastering the register and knowing when and where to use them. You mentioned the risk of sounding pretentious if you overuse peruse. So how does the learner practice suitability?
By observing the context. Notice the difference in register we saw today between the frazzled coffee shop chat, where idioms built rapport, and the pharmacy, where clinical precision was absolutely necessary.
So the sophistication is in the suitability.
That's it. You practice suitability by listening for the subtle formality cues in your environment. If the restaurant is using culinary terms like bisque, you can respond with words like impeccable and palate. If you're discussing city problems, you use technical terms like gridlock and thoroughfare.
So it's about matching the linguistic level of the environment and the other speaker. You don't want to overshoot or undershoot.
Exactly. You are trying to find the appropriate social weight for your words. Knowing the word impeccable is step one. Knowing that it's suitable for a beautiful dish, but probably excessive for describing the weather. That's the C2 skill.
A perfect distinction. So we'll leave you, the learner, with this final provocative thought, building on that idea of suitability and social risk. We looked at 6 scenarios today. What other common daily interactions, maybe ones where the stakes are a little bit higher, are ripe for this kind of C2 elevation?
Think about negotiating a bill with the service provider. You need words like discrepancy or asking them to rectify an error. Or think about giving measured professional criticism to a colleague on a report. You'd need words like adverse implications or talking about an untenable premise, or even just discussing a nuanced political event where you need language that avoids simplistic good-bad binaries. Using phrases like preconditions or inherently flawed.
In all of those moments, the advanced vocabulary isn't just for description.
It's for managing the social risk of the conversation itself, whether that risk is causing offense, being misunderstood, or just failing to get what you want. That is where true mastery starts to serve your real-world goals.
The linguistic upgrade becomes the confidence upgrade. Thank you for joining us for this advanced deep dive into the language of nuance.
Keep practicing that synonym selection, and keep listening for those crucial opportunities to upgrade your daily dialogue. Welcome back to the deep dive. If you're joining us today, you've probably realized that just being competent in the language isn't always enough, not when the stakes are high. We're moving far beyond the basics. We're really focusing today on, that C2 level of communication, the advanced professional grade language, where tact and strategy and persuasion, they become your most valuable tools.
That's absolutely right. I mean, our mission here is to move you past the realm of just being understood and into the realm of effective influence.
Right.
So we've taken a stack of sources. These are detailed transcripts of real high-stakes conversations, and we're using them as a kind of blueprint. This deep dive is your shortcut to mastering not just the vocabulary, but the diplomatic maneuvers you need when the outcome really hinges on how you phrase something.
The power here is all in the subtlety, isn't it, if you think about it?
Yeah.
Negotiating a big contract, trying to secure a top job, or even just making a complex customer complaint.
Yeah, all of those.
Yeah. In all these moments, the difference between saying, it's broken and it's malfunctioning, or between I ran a project and I spearheaded a project, that can define success or failure. So we're really analyzing the mechanics of that success.
And we've isolated 5 core scenarios that really demand the specific, sophisticated linguistic approach. We're going to dissect the language used in professional job interviews.
Okay.
Handling those high-level customer complaints, the nuances of making a graceful social cancellation, the rain check.
A tricky one.
Very tricky. Then complex contract negotiations, and finally, advanced professional networking that's really designed to gather intel.
It's time to unpack this.
Yeah.
Let's start with the one where every single word is measured and analyzed.
Yeah.
The professional job interview.
Oh.
So scenario 7. It gives us a candidate who is, they're just operating at an incredibly high level.
Yeah.
They seem to get that an interview isn't just a Q&A session. It's more like a meticulously crafted presentation of their professional story. It all starts with that opening impression.
It really does. The difference between a good candidate and a truly great one is often set in the first 2 minutes. The standard greeting, I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me, is, it's necessary.
It's the baseline.
It's the baseline, but it's not sufficient. What this candidate does immediately after is what really sets them apart.
They show their prep work. Instead of just waiting for the interviewer to ask about the company, the candidate weaves their research right into that opening exchange. They mention the company's trajectory.
Yes.
And specific strategic moves, like their recent expansion into the Asian market.
And that word trajectory, it's extremely powerful. It suggests that the candidate sees the company not just as, a static employer.
Right, not just a place to work.
Exactly, but as a dynamic entity that's moving toward a defined future, a future they want to actively shape. It kind of flips the conversation away from just their past experience and immediately toward how they can contribute to the company's forward momentum.
So it signals a strategic mindset, not just a tactical one.
That's the perfect way to put it.
But hold on, couldn't that risk sounding a little, too flattering? Or maybe even overly rehearsed? How do they keep it sounding authentic while using this kind of sophisticated language?
That's a crucial point. The authenticity is maintained because they immediately connect that high-level observation to their own experience. They don't just drop the phrase Asian market expansion and leave it hanging. They position their own relevant skills, let's say in international logistics or cross-cultural team management, as being perfectly aligned with that trajectory. The language feels sophisticated because it's applied knowledge. It's not just general flattery.
Got it. Okay, so moving on to the core of it, highlighting achievement. This is where the candidate has to shift from just summarizing what they did to explaining the impact.
Exactly.
And in this case, they're describing how they tackled a pretty significant supply chain issue.
Right, and this is the difference between writing, an average resume bullet point and really articulating strategic leadership. This candidate didn't just say they ran a logistics project. No, they used the verb that suggests initiating force and responsibility, spearheaded a logistics project.
Okay, let's focus on that verb, spearheaded. I mean, if I'm an interviewer, I'd probably hear that a lot. How does the candidate make sure that powerful word doesn't just sound like empty corporate jargon?
That's a great question.
What's the real difference between that and, say, I led that project, which sounds maybe a bit more direct?
It's a brilliant, critical question, because spearheaded implies two things that led doesn't quite capture. First, initiation. You often created the momentum yourself. You saw the problem before other people did.
Okay, so you were the one who got the ball rolling.
Yes. And second, spearheaded suggests a kind of directional force against resistance. You were the tip of the spear, pushing through obstacles. To use it successfully, though, and this is key, you have to immediately back it up with the measurable details of the outcome. Otherwise, it's just jargon.
So in this scenario, they follow spearheaded with the actual mechanics of what they did, implementing a new automated tracking system.
Correct. And look at the language they use for the outcome. They didn't say they fixed the problem. They implemented a system that alleviated the congestion.
Alleviated the congestion. Yeah. That sounds almost medical.
It is. It's fantastic. Alleviated sounds measured, therapeutic, and systemic. Fix the problem sounds like you're a firefighter. You reactively solved a crisis.
Right.
But alleviated congestion sounds like systemic design. You proactively improve the underlying structure of the system.
And crucially, they tie it immediately to the bottom line. They reduced overhead costs by 15%.
High-stakes communication absolutely demands quantification. If you spearhead something and you alleviate a problem, you must translate that action into tangible metrics, financial, efficiency, whatever. Without that 15% figure, the language is just aspirational. With it, it's irrefutable proof of impact. That is the language of executive presence.
Okay, let's look at how they handle a real landmine of a question, handling conflict and collaboration. The interviewer asks how the candidate resolves situations where team objectives clash, the classic priorities problem.
Right. And the candidate avoids the common sort of passive mistake of just saying, I just talked to everyone. They frame conflict not as, interpersonal tension, but as a structural hurdle.
A structural hurdle.
A structural hurdle that requires transparency and early compromise.
Transparency and early compromise. Wow. That instantly defines their whole approach as proactive and, ethically sound. They're establishing a philosophy for how they operate in a team.
And then immediately they turn that philosophy into an actionable solution. They propose to facilitate a stakeholder meeting to align our objectives.
Notice the word facilitate. They aren't dictating a solution.
Exactly. They're managing the process of collaboration. And align our objectives just sounds so much more sophisticated than get everyone on the same page.
It does.
Alignment suggests a structured harmony, all moving towards a common corporate goal.
I think that's the key distinction, really. They're describing a structured protocol for resolution. It tells the interviewer they won't waste time on, unstructured arguments.
Precisely. And the outcome assurance just solidifies this professional image. The goal is always finding a middle ground where neither quality nor deadlines are compromised. This sophisticated phrasing shows they understand that core tension in almost every project. The balance between speed and excellence. They're promising a solution that honors both, which is really the definition of managerial competence.
So we have to tackle the most anticipated and maybe most dreaded part of any interview, the managed weakness.
Ah, yes. The what's your greatest weakness question.
The source material shows the candidate chose overly meticulous. And I have to say, isn't that a total cliche? How do they possibly pull that off without sounding like they just read it from a self-help book?
That's a fantastic challenge. And you're right, it is a cliche if you deliver it poorly. The success lies entirely in the self-awareness they show and the immediate mitigation strategy they offer.
Okay, so how do they do it?
The candidate first acknowledges the potential downside. They admit to a tendency to get bogged down in the details. This shows honesty. It's credible. But they immediately reframe the issue as a continuous professional development goal.
So it's not just a flaw they have, it's a flaw they are actively working to neutralize.
Exactly. By admitting they have a plan, learning to delegate more effectively, they demonstrate growth and an understanding of scale. A senior role requires strategic focus, not just high execution detail. Their weakness is that they care too much about quality, but they're evolving past that micromanagement phase.
And the ultimate payoff of this whole mitigation strategy is the assurance that the delegation is designed to ensure they maintain a strategic overview of the project.
And that's the linguistic pivot that saves the cliche. They transition from an individual contributor weakness, which is getting bogged down, to a strategic strength, which is maintaining high-level oversight. They've effectively turned a potential red flag into a demonstration of advanced self-management and an orientation toward the company's bigger picture. They're basically signaling, I know myself, I know the demands of the senior role, and I'm already adapting. That is the absolute zenith of how to present a weakness.
Okay, so we've mastered the strategic confidence of the interview. Now, what happens when things go wrong? We move to scenario 8, handling a high-value customer complaint, specifically a defective, expensive item.
Yes. This is where emotions can so often hijack rational communication.
For sure. In high-stakes complaints, the goal of your language has to be de-escalation, but not avoidance. The customer has to communicate seriousness and specific knowledge to command respect and get immediate action.
And the first linguistic shift is moving away from that loaded emotional language.
So the customer, in our transcript, they avoid saying, it's broken, which can sound a bit vague and accusatory. Instead, they elevate the language by stating the machine is malfunctioning.
That is such a critical distinction. Malfunctioning is precise, it's technical language. It speaks to a system failure, not a personal failure by the manufacturer or the salesperson. It establishes the customer as someone who understands the machine's mechanics. But they can't stop there.
Right, they have to provide the specifics.
Exactly.
And they do. They list the symptoms very clearly. The pressure gauge is erratic, and it's leaking water from the base.
This specific detail is a conversational force multiplier. It forces the manager to bypass the usual, troubleshooting script.
Did you try turning it off and on again?
Right, exactly. It forces them to recognize an immediate severe manufacturing defect. It signals to the company, I have identified a serious issue, and I expect an equally serious, swift resolution. If the customer had just said, it doesn't work, the response would have been so much slower and probably less generous.
And then comes the expression of disappointment. This is where most people would just vent. But this customer uses a very measured approach. They say, I'm quite disappointed as I was assured this was a top-of-the-line model.
It's an appeal to the company's own reputation and its quality promises. It's not a direct attack on the person they're talking to or even the product itself. They're basically reminding the company that its own standards were not met. This puts the burden of proof and resolution squarely on the company without creating any personal antagonism. It's diplomacy used for leverage.
Okay, so now let's look at the manager's response, which is just a masterclass in service recovery. They can't afford to get defensive here.
No, they can't. And the manager's response is textbook C2 level professional resolution. They start with immediate validation and accountability. Phrases like, that is certainly not the standard we strive for, and the immediate expression of empathy, I completely understand your frustration, are absolutely essential.
So they accept accountability for the corporate standard without taking personal blame or escalating the conflict. They're speaking for the brand, not just defending themselves.
And this immediate validation paves the way for the resolution. The manager doesn't delay or try to repair the item first. They offer an immediate, unambiguous choice.
A binary choice.
Yes, immediate replacement, or if you prefer, a full refund to your original payment method. Speed and clarity are the highest forms of respect you can show in a complaint scenario.
But let's imagine for a second that the manager was maybe less experienced, and they'd said something like, well, we can try to fix it, but it might take a week.
Yeah.
How would the customer's sophisticated language prepare them to counter that kind of delay?
That's where the initial precise language really pays off. If the manager suggests a repair or a delay, the customer can just refer back to the specific technical defect they already identified, the erratic pressure gauge and the leak from the base. They can assert that these are structural defects that undermine confidence, making a repair inadequate. They could say something diplomatic like, given the nature of the malfunction, I'm afraid a repair doesn't restore my confidence in the reliability of this unit. This frames the request for a replacement not as a personal preference, but as a technical necessity.
That's great. Sticking to the technical language keeps the whole conversation rational. Now, in this transcript, the customer pivots after the offer is made. They say they've lost a bit of confidence in this specific brand. This presents a new challenge for the manager.
It does. It signals that the issue isn't just with that one machine, but with the entire product line. This is a crucial cue for high-level service recovery. The manager has to recognize the customer is ready to defect entirely, and this should trigger the alternative pitch, the upsell, or the lateral move.
So the manager steers the customer toward the Barista Pro model. What language do they use to sell this alternative without sounding pushy?
They use the language of reliability, which directly addresses the customer's stated lack of confidence. They point out the positive data. We've had 0 returns on it. That single data point is worth more than any sales pitch because it speaks directly to the customer's immediate need, reliability after a failure.
And the final piece, the gesture of goodwill. It's so much more effective than just saying, I'm sorry.
The 10% discount offered as a gesture of goodwill for the inconvenience is basically the financial articulation of their apology. It transforms a transaction that was focused on loss, the refund or return, into a transaction focused on future value.
The discounted new product.
Right. It demonstrates that the company values the customer's loyalty and time, and it successfully retains a high-value customer. It might even increase the final sale margin. It's a complete service recovery cycle, all done through tactful diplomacy.
Okay, let's shift gears entirely. We're moving from high-stakes commerce to high-stakes relationships. Canceling social plans, especially important ones, requires incredible tact if you want to make sure the relationship isn't damaged. The excuse, no matter how legitimate, still causes inconvenience.
This scenario is just a masterclass in anticipating and neutralizing social guilt. The first line sets the tone perfectly. It uses this evocative phrase to convey immediate, deep regret. Calling with my tail between my legs.
That phrase instantly broadcasts vulnerability and a profound apology. You're acknowledging the inconvenience before you even state the reason. It's self-deprecating humor used for diplomatic ends.
Precisely. It immediately softens the blow. Then comes the direct cancellation, but it's framed softly. I'm afraid I'm going to have to bail on our dinner plans tonight. Note the use of afraid, which conveys reluctance, and bail, which is, slightly informal, but universally understood among friends. It keeps the cancellation from sounding too formal or detached.
Now, the justification. Generic excuses often raise suspicion. This friend provides specific, undeniable symptoms. I've come down with something, I've got the chills and a splitting headache.
Specificity breeds credibility. By listing actual symptoms, you move the excuse from the theoretical realm of, I just don't feel well.
Which could mean anything.
Could mean anything. And you move it into the tangible realm. A headache and chills sound specific and severe enough to absolutely warrant a cancellation.
And crucially, the intent behind the cancellation is framed as altruism. It's about protecting the friend. I don't want to risk passing it on to you.
This is a social superpower. You're transforming the cancellation from what could be seen as a selfish inconvenience, I want to stay home, to a selfless act of protection.
I value your health.
I value your health. It shifts the friend's perception from annoyance to appreciation. This maneuver is just essential for maintaining trust.
Let's play this out. If the friend had instead said, I have to work late, or I'm just too tired, what immediate damage does that do to the relationship compared to the protection excuse?
Well, a statement like, I have to work late or I'm too tired implies that your professional or personal needs outweigh the existing commitment and the friend's value. That can breed resentment.
Sure.
But the protection excuse is irrefutable and it's complementary. It says, the reason I'm canceling is because of my consideration for you, which actually reinforces the friendship.
That brings us to the accepting friend's response. They immediately de-escalate. validating the excuse. They say, don't give it a second thought, and your health comes first. This is the ideal reciprocal response. It confirms the relationship is prioritized over the plan.
And they use a really subtle technique to soften the blow even further. They relate to the situation. I've had a grueling week myself, so a quiet night in doesn't sound terrible. By admitting their own stress, they turn the cancellation into an unexpected, kind of mutually beneficial respite. The guilt the canceling friend feels is instantly minimized.
The ultimate sign of a successful, mature social interaction here is the immediate commitment to rescheduling the rain check. This proves the cancellation was a postponement, not an avoidance.
And the language here has to be concrete, not vague. It's not, let's catch up soon. It's, can we take a rain check? Maybe next Tuesday. By proposing a specific date and time, even if it ends up changing later, the commitment is established right away. They take the burden of replanning off the other person, solidifying the relationship and showing real commitment.
And the follow-up reassurance seals the deal. I'll make it up to you next week. Dinner is on me. That small financial promise, combined with a specific date-driven proposal, ensures the friend feels valued and respected, not just dismissed. It's a perfect balance of regret, justification, and future commitment.
So we're transitioning back now to high finance and legal precision. Negotiating a contract requires language that is both assertive and collaborative. You have to raise specific reservations without sounding like you're just attacking the whole agreement.
Right. And scenario 10 involves a tenant negotiating a standard lease agreement. The professional approach is crucial. They start by signaling overall agreement before introducing the sticking point. They say, generally, it looks acceptable, but I do have a reservation regarding the clause about early termination.
That structure is so non-combative and highly effective. You acknowledge the positive, the agreement is generally acceptable before you pinpoint the specific area of friction. This maintains a collaborative atmosphere. Then, they immediately detail the concern, forfeiting the entire deposit if they leave before 12 months. Specificity is power in negotiation.
And the justification is clear, and importantly, it's externally dictated. It's not about them just wanting to go on vacation. It's due to the nature of their job. They say they might be transferred overseas with short notice.
And that external justification turns a personal desire for flexibility into a legitimate business requirement. This makes the request seem reasonable and predictable from the agent's perspective. The tenant then uses this great, direct, but still collaborative phrase to open the modification discussion. Is there any wiggle room on that?
Wiggle room?
Yeah.
It's informal enough to sound human, but it's direct enough to signal that they're serious about demanding a change.
Absolutely. It's a great piece of sophisticated casual language that just cuts through all the formal contract jargon. Now let's think about the agent's response. They could have just said no. What if they had said, no, this is standard procedure, there is absolutely no wiggle room?
If that happened, I suppose the tenant would need a counter tactic based on market awareness. They might ask for a different kind of concession, maybe negotiating the cost of utilities or shifting the conversation toward what's average for the market. They might say something like, I understand this is standard, but given that comparable properties in this area offer a 6-month break clause, can we revisit the penalty to reflect a more competitive market standard?
Precisely. They would pivot to a different point of leverage. But in this successful scenario, the agent recognizes the external constraint and offers a solution that balances the landlord's risk with the tenant's need. They propose adding a diplomatic clause.
That term, diplomatic clause, sounds so much better than just an exception. It's sophisticated contractual language for a mutually beneficial legal out. It sounds structured and official.
It is. And the compromise is structured with a clear, verifiable condition. The tenant has to provide proof of job relocation. This protects the landlord from arbitrary moves. And the reduction of the penalty from the full deposit to just 1 month's rent is a tangible, acceptable compromise. It shows creative, flexible problem solving within that legal framework.
So this shows that high-level negotiation is often about finding the mutually acceptable exception to the standard rule, not just rejecting the rule entirely.
And it requires meticulous attention to detail. The tenant then handles secondary concerns with the same precision, asking if utilities are inclusive or are they billed separately. This avoids any future ambiguity about costs, which can be a huge source of conflict down the road.
And the agent provides a precise, clear answer. Water and heating are included. Electricity and internet are the tenant's responsibility. No hedging, just clear lines.
And the tenant closes the deal by making their signing conditional only on the amendment they just discussed. If we can amend that termination clause, I'm ready to sign on the dotted line. It's firm, it's efficient, and it's professional. The entire exchange moved from identifying a risk, justifying an exception, negotiating a compromise, and then confirming the final commitment, all structured with maximum clarity.
Okay, our final scenario. This one tackles professional networking, the challenge of turning that superficial small talk at a conference into genuine, actionable professional value, or, as the source calls it, gathering intel.
Yes, and this is where social intelligence really meets business strategy.
Successful networking seems to be a gradual layering process. You can't just jump straight to the strategic questions.
No, you can't. You have to start with the shared, low-stakes observation, the icebreaker. In this transcript, it's commenting on the event itself. Quite a turnout tonight. Or noting the venue is packed, maybe even a bit claustrophobic.
That's the relational entry point. It requires zero commitment from the other person, and it establishes immediate common ground. But the transition needs to be pretty immediate and intellectual to move the conversation forward. And here, they pivot using the keynote speaker.
This is an excellent move. Discussing the speaker immediately elevates the intellectual level of the conversation. They call the speaker a provocative thinker, but importantly, they qualify it. They offer a nuanced opinion. Though I don't subscribe to all his theories on market economics.
Why is that qualification so important? Why not just say, the speaker was brilliant?
Because merely agreeing is passive. Qualifying your opinion, saying you don't subscribe to all the theories, shows critical engagement. It shows independent thought and intellectual credibility. You're signaling that you're not just a passive listener. You have your own well-formed perspective, and it invites a deeper discussion or even a gentle challenge, which is the whole point of sophisticated networking.
So once that intellectual credibility is established, they move to professional identification. They exchange names and fields. One works in fintech and the other in renewable energy consulting.
And here, the social intelligence really kicks in. The fintech attendee acknowledges the difficulty of the other person's industry. They recognize that renewable energy is a turbulent industry at the moment. This shows they aren't just there to talk about themselves, they're actually following external industry news.
And they use some great advanced vocabulary to describe the pressure the consultant must be under. The fintech specialist says, with the new regulations coming into play, you must be swamped.
Swamped. It's that perfect professional synonym for being extremely busy, but it carries a connotation of being overwhelmed by external structural forces like new regulations. It's relatable, it acknowledges the industry context, and it shows the speaker understands the demands on the consultant's time. It's empathy packaged in a professional observation.
Let's compare that for a second. If they just asked, are you busy? It would sound so generic. How does you must be swamped improve on that?
Well, are you busy invites a simple yes or no, and it requires the consultant to do all the work to elaborate. But you must be swamped with these new regulations is declarative. It shows you've already done the homework, you understand their pressure points, and you're offering an observation. It's much more conducive to receiving detailed information back. It demonstrates the conversation is built on a foundation of shared industry knowledge.
And the ultimate goal is achieved when the fintech specialist explains their professional purpose candidly. They transition so smoothly from small talk to stating their objective, looking into how global economic shifts are going to impact cryptocurrency markets.
And this leads to the direct goal, which is framed honestly but professionally. I'm essentially here to gather intel. This candor works because the intellectual groundwork has already been laid. It signals, I respect your expertise and I'm here to learn. It invites the other person to share information within that context without feeling like they're being manipulated.
That is the difference between awkward questioning and professional inquiry. And then they move immediately to capitalize on the connection by proposing a concrete follow-up. They don't just exchange cards and hope for the best.
No. They state, I'd love to hear your take on that. Let's grab a drink after the speech. This is a direct, immediate call to action. It capitalizes on the momentum of the connection, it validates the conversation they just had, and it promises future value by asking for specific advice. Your take on that. It's the blueprint for turning a chance encounter into a real, actionable professional connection. #tag outro.
So we've covered 5 crucial scenarios today, dissecting the precise language needed to navigate these professional, commercial, and personal high-stakes interactions.
Yeah.
The central theme that really ties every scenario together is this deliberate, conscious shift from casual, passive conversation to using targeted power words that demonstrate competence, authority, and diplomatic tact.
When you really review the transcripts, the shift in vocabulary is remarkable. It's illuminating. We moved past these general descriptions to very technical, specific language.
Right. Instead of saying an appliance is just broken or not working, we learned to use formal, precise terms like malfunctioning and to detail the symptoms like the pressure gauge is erratic. This controls the narrative, and it ensures the issue is taken seriously from the start.
And in the interview setting, we elevated project participation from, I ran the project to I spearheaded a logistics project, which instantly claims initiation and leadership. And we stopped fixing the problem and started alleviating congestion, demonstrating systemic thinking, and providing quantified results.
I think the value of this deep dive isn't just knowing these words. It's about internalizing the flow and the context of how they're applied. Whether it was the graceful altruism of the social cancellation or the, professional structural analysis of conflict resolution in the interview, the ability to deploy these phrases naturally is what moves you into that advanced communicative sphere.
Ultimately, the skill to navigate a high-stakes conversation with grace and precision, it's a professional superpower. It really is, because it allows you to de-escalate tension, to structure beneficial outcomes, and to control the professional narrative. It signals to others that you are serious, you're capable, and you are worth listening to.
So what does this all mean for you as you start to integrate these tools? We looked at a lot of diplomatic techniques today, from the empathetic structure of complaint resolution to the strategic mitigation of a personal weakness in an interview. Which of those two diplomatic language techniques, the empathetic complaint resolution or the strategic weakness mitigation, do you think is the most underrated superpower in professional life today? The skill to turn a moment of friction or even a personal flaw into a moment of managed advantage. I think it's invaluable. Something to mull over until our next deep dive.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are taking on what I think is really the final frontier in advanced English communication. We've got this stack of sources that deals exclusively with nuance, high stakes, and, subjective feelings and objective critique.
Yeah, this is for you if you're ready to move beyond just the basics, beyond just exchanging information like directions or timetables.
Right.
Our mission today is to really excavate the specific vocabulary, the structural strategies that let you handle things like disagreement politely or offer really deep empathy or even deliver a sharp critique without sounding like a jerk. This is mastery.
We're so far beyond how to order coffee here. We're looking at scenarios that force native speakers to pull out their most sophisticated language tools. I mean, we're talking about relationship breakups, high-level corporate debates, technical meltdown.
And dissecting art that just didn't work.
Exactly. These are those interactions that feel messy, and mastering them is what really defines that C2 level speaker.
The material we've gathered, these advanced conversational scenarios, it makes one thing really clear. The biggest hurdle isn't grammar. It's strategic deployment.
Strategic deployment. I like that.
It is. How do you deploy assertive language without it tipping over into aggression? Or how do you offer empathy without sounding, patronizing? We're hunting for the specific idioms and the softening phrases that kind of act as social lubricants in these really high-tension conversations.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our first section starts where the stakes are often, I think, the highest, the professional world. This is all about managing opinions and resolving serious errors with a kind of surgical precision. Yeah. All right, so our first scenario tackles that ever-present hot-button issue in the modern workplace, the mandatory return to the office.
Oh, yeah.
So we have two colleagues discussing a rumor, and I think it's important that it starts as just a rumor, that management is thinking about pulling everyone back in 5 days a week.
And right out of the gate, the conversation is just a masterclass in diplomatic disagreement. One of the colleagues, they don't start with this, hard no. They introduce their feelings with this perfect balancing language. They say, I have mixed feelings about that possibility.
That phrase right there, mixed feelings.
Yeah.
Let's stop on that for a second. Why is that so much more effective than just jumping in with, I disagree?
Because it immediately signals to the other person that you're thoughtful, that you've weighed both sides of the issue. It opens the door for a discussion rather than slamming it shut.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then they follow it up by asserting their own position, but they focus on tangible, positive outcomes. They say they thrive on the flexibility and it's done wonders for my work-life balance. So they ground their preference in a measurable personal benefit, which makes it really hard for anyone to just dismiss it.
That's a great strategy. You're not just making a demand, you're explaining the benefit. But then the other colleague, introduces the counterpoint. And this is the specific tool I think we really need to spend some time on. They say, however, allow me to play devil's advocate for a moment.
That phrase is a phenomenal linguistic strategy. It's what I call permission language.
Permission language.
Yeah. It essentially says, look, I'm about to introduce an opposing or maybe a difficult view, but please know I'm doing it for the sake of a full discussion, not because I'm personally hostile to your point.
It is a really interesting little social contract, isn't it?
Yeah.
But does using a phrase that's, I don't know, that formal, allow me to play devil's advocate, does that ever risk sounding a bit too stiff?
Yeah.
A bit too corporate?
That's a fair question. But I think in advanced workplace discussions, precision often wins out over being extremely casual. I mean, if you just said, but what about the other side? You could sound confrontational. Playing devil's advocate is just. It's recognized professional shorthand. It gives you the space you need to voice those unpopular points, like the ones that are raised here. The loss of a certain spark and the lack of spontaneous collaboration.
And I love that the other person doesn't just, bat that away. They validate it. They say that's a valid point, and they immediately concede some ground by admitting Zoom fatigue is real and that creative brainstorming is definitely more stilted online.
This is so critical. An advanced debate is often about validating the other side's pain points. And listen to the vivid language there. They don't just say brainstorming is awkward. They say it's stilted. That word suggests a kind of forced, unnatural movement. It's like you're trying to talk while wearing a corset or something. It's highly descriptive, and it really articulates that subtle friction of virtual work.
But then they pivot. They pivot right back to the core conflict, which is that 5 days is excessive. And the conversation moves pretty quickly towards finding that ideal compromise.
They establish the extremes, right? 5 days in, 5 days out. And then they settle on that practical middle ground, the hybrid model. 3 days in, 2 days out. And this is just classic negotiation strategy, but it's embedded right into the conversational flow. They're moving from personal preference to organizational forecasting, which is really the hallmark of a high-level communicator.
Right, because the discussion completely shifts at this point. It goes from what I want to what will happen to the company. They start predicting the fallout. One colleague says enforcing a total return will cause significant pushback. That's already pretty strong.
But the language gets even stronger. It elevates. The other colleague uses this high-stakes business vocabulary. They say, retention rates will plummet.
Plummet.
Yeah, that word plummet. It suggests as a dramatic, catastrophic drop. It's not just a decline. It puts the cost of this decision into immediate, almost quantitative terms. We are going to lose our talent.
And then we get the final, incredibly powerful idiom of conviction. They say this issue is a hill many people are willing to die on.
That phrase is just pure, unshakable conviction. It's military in origin, right? It's a position of ultimate strategic importance, one that you would defend to the death. When you use that in a professional setting, you're telling management and everyone listening that this isn't some minor grievance.
It's not a passing complaint.
Exactly. It is a non-negotiable term of employment for a huge part of your workforce.
It's such a concise way to communicate the absolute severity of the opposition.
Yeah.
But let me push on that a little. Is that idiom ever, too dramatic for an office setting? Doesn't it sort of imply corporate warfare?
And that's where context is everything. I mean, if they were talking about where to order lunch, it would be completely absurd.
Right.
But here, they're talking about a fundamental shift in work-life balance that directly affects recruitment, retention, the core health of the company. In that context, the severity is warranted. The advanced speaker knows when to stop using the softening language and switch to the language of ultimate consequence. This phrase signals this is the line in the sand.
Okay, so if the last scenario was about professional conflict, this one is all about professional crisis and accountability. Scenario 15 is about a supervisor who finds a major discrepancy in a quarterly report's revenue figures.
And it's an hour before a board meeting. The stakes are high.
Extremely high.
And the supervisor's opening line is just a model of controlled communication. They state the fact, but there's no accusation. They say, there seems to be a discrepancy in the revenue figures. They don't align with the data from the sales team.
They use that neutral technical term discrepancy, not mistake or error.
Exactly. That keeps attention from immediately spiking. It's very measured.
I think the most important skill we see here, though, is from the employee. They display immediate, unequivocal ownership. They don't make excuses. They don't shift blame. They dive straight into the technical fault, which to me actually increases their credibility. They say, it appears I may have inadvertently pulled the data from the draft spreadsheet rather than the finalized version.
We have to highlight that word, inadvertently. That is critical vocabulary for accountability. It's the formal way of saying by accident or unintentionally. It assures the supervisor that this was a procedural slip-up, not, some deliberate misrepresentation.
All right.
And then they follow it up with that powerful summary phrase, that was a complete oversight on my part.
Let me push back on that for a second.
Yeah.
The phrase complete oversight. Given the severity of this board meeting in an hour, wouldn't a highly efficient communicator just say, my fault, fixing it now? Is complete oversight a little too formal for a crisis moment?
That's an excellent point, and it gets to the heart of efficiency versus formality. And while my fault, fixing it now is definitely efficient, the phrase, that was a complete oversight on my part, does two things that the simpler phrase doesn't. First, it uses language that's appropriate for formal communications, like a follow-up email, which shows professional maturity. And second, that word complete signals that they fully understand the gravity of the situation. They are taking full responsibility. There's no ambiguity. It's professional jargon for, I own this, 100%.
And the supervisor's reaction is just as crucial, especially for leadership. They deploy the perfect tension diffuser. They just say, well, these things happen.
We have to analyze that phrase, these things happen. It's not just a cliche, it is a de-escalation mechanism. It immediately pulls the focus away from the human error, the employee's embarrassment, and it refocuses all that energy onto the solution.
A bad leader would dwell on the mistake.
They'd assign blame. A strong leader pivots to action.
And that pivot is immediate. How quickly can we rectify this? The board meeting is in an hour. The question is solution-focused. It's driven by that pressure point.
Precisely. And the employee matches that urgency. They promise the corrected version in 10 minutes, and then they proactively offer to double-check the rest of the document. This shows competence not just in fixing the mistake, but in crisis response.
This is where the conversation moves to that critical advanced step, system improvement. The supervisor doesn't just accept the fix and move on. They make a long-term suggestion to stop it from happening again.
Yes. They suggest implementing a peer review step before final submission to avoid these slip-ups. This is the highest level of professional communication. You're turning a mistake into a systematic improvement. And notice the word choice there. They've shifted from discrepancy to slip-ups.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's a slightly softer term, right?
Yeah.
It's used after the crisis has been managed. It signals that the tension has been lowered, and now the focus is on constructive, future-oriented change.
And the conclusion just closes the loop professionally. The employee agrees to make it a priority and expresses gratitude. Thank you for catching that so quickly. So, I guess to sum it up, mastering this kind of scenario isn't just about owning the error. It's about communicating the technical fix and the future preventive measures with clinical precision.
Okay, we are shifting gears here pretty dramatically. We're moving from the cool, solution-focused logic of the boardroom to the much more challenging territory of subjective experience.
Right. True mastery, I think, is really measured by how you navigate these highly personal and highly critical situations.
Yeah, this section requires the most sophisticated language tools because the facts are almost secondary to the feelings. You have to handle these abstract concepts like grief, disappointment, artistic failure.
That's a whole different ballgame.
It really is.
Yeah.
So, scenario 13 is a heart-to-heart between friends. One of them has just called it quits on a long-term relationship. And this is a place where simplistic language just fails completely. Oh, absolutely. The supportive friend has to deploy what you might call an empathy toolkit. And they begin by acknowledging the struggle that came before the decision. That validates the pain. They say, I know things have been rocky, but I didn't realize it had reached a breaking point.
That phrase, breaking point, is so important. It shows you recognize the decision wasn't made lightly. It was the end result of a long, difficult struggle, not just some whim.
Exactly. And then comes that genuine, open check-in. How are you holding up? So simple, so direct, and so necessary.
The response from the grieving friend gives us these incredibly resonant idioms of pain. They say they're feeling a bit numb, which just perfectly captures that feeling of emotional overload or shock.
But the really memorable phrase, the one that defines the difficulty of it all, is describing the breakup as a bitter pill to swallow. especially after, as they say, invested 3 years into this relationship.
I think we need to spend a moment on a bitter pill to swallow. It's just so much more evocative than saying, this is hard to accept.
It is. The metaphor is immediate. It's visceral. You can almost feel it. Something unpleasant that you must physically ingest even though you don't want to. It captures the difficulty, the forced nature of acceptance, and the underlying necessity of the decision. It elevates the conversation from just a casual complaint to a deep psychological struggle.
Yeah, if you just respond with generic comfort like, oh, you'll feel better soon, you completely negate that complexity.
You do, which leads to what I think is the most high-level empathetic response in this entire scenario. The supportive friend validates the sheer magnitude of the loss. They say it's completely natural to feel that way, and then comes the masterstroke. You're grieving the future you thought you had.
Wow.
That reframing is profound. It's what separates superficial sympathy from deep, true empathy. Most people would focus on the loss of the partner, the past relationship.
Right, what's already gone.
But the advanced communicator recognizes that a 3-year relationship isn't just about the past. It's about shared goals, future homes, maybe kids, retirement plans. The grieving person is dealing with the death of an entire possible future. And by identifying that specific type of grief, the supportive friend makes the other person feel truly deeply understood.
That is powerful. But advanced comfort also seems to require a pivot, a transition back to objectivity. The supportive friend asks this really difficult but essential question. But looking at it objectively, do you think it was the right decision? Isn't that a little risky? You're asking someone who's in acute pain to suddenly apply cold logic.
It is risky, absolutely, but it's a necessary part of the healing process. And the phrase looking at it objectively acts as a clear signal for that transition. It gives the grieving friend permission to step outside of their raw emotion for just a moment and look at the situation from a distance. The supportive friend is actually providing a kind of structure for processing the grief.
And the grieving friend is able to do it. They articulate the core issue, finding that necessary logic. In hindsight, yes, we were fundamentally incompatible on the big issues.
That phrase, fundamentally incompatible, that's another essential piece of vocabulary. It's a precise, sophisticated way of saying, we just disagreed on the really important stuff. It provides the rational closure that's needed to balance out the emotional pain. So the pain is real, but the decision had a logical foundation.
The comfort language at the end is built on these metaphors of resilience. They tell their friend, you're incredibly resilient, you will weather this storm.
You will weather this storm. Again, just a powerful metaphor. Storms are temporary, they're difficult, they're painful, often frightening, but they pass. It instills hope without minimizing the current difficulty. It suggests temporary hardship, not permanent defeat.
And then finally, that practical, low-pressure offer of support.
Yeah.
They don't demand any action. They just offer to be a phone call away if you need to vent or just sit in silence.
And we have to notice the sophistication of that offer. Just sit in silence. That acknowledges that sometimes the most profound comfort is just non-demanding presence. It requires zero effort from the person who's in pain, which is exactly what deep, mature friendship offers. I mean, this whole scenario is really a playbook for emotional depth.
All right, moving from a personal heart-to-heart to artistic critique. Scenario 14 presents a different challenge. It's about offering a nuanced judgment, right? Praising some elements while panning the overall thing.
And this is where advanced vocabulary ensures you sound discerning, not just, cranky or negative.
The structure is everything here. It's that rhetorical tool, the compliment sandwich, but it's executed at a very high level. You have to establish your credibility as an objective observer first.
Exactly. So the speaker starts with this unequivocal praise for the technical production.
They lead with, visually, it was breathtaking. And then they elaborate with this incredibly specific high-level vocabulary. The cinematography was absolutely stellar. Every shot looked like a painting.
Stellar. Breathtaking. I mean, this is not average praise. This suggests top-tier technical achievement. And saying every shot looked like a painting is using an analogy from visual art to describe filmmaking, which itself shows a certain critical fluency.
But the other shoe's about to drop.
Of course. And it's perfectly signaled by the other person's response. I sense a but coming. So how does the speaker make that transition to the negative critique without undermining all that initial praise?
They use what I'd call intellectualized disappointment, not just raw anger. The narrative was a bit derivative.
Yes, derivative. That is a key piece of critical vocabulary. Instead of just saying it wasn't original, which is blunt. Derivative implies it was copied from or heavily inspired by other works. It suggests a lack of original thought without necessarily attacking the artist's effort. It was a rehash of themes we've seen a dozen times before.
And then they move on to the pacing, which is where the descriptive language really escalates. It shows you how to intensify critique just through word choice. The pacing was first described as quite slow, but the response elevates it to glacial is the word I would use.
Glacial. That is brilliant. It's such descriptive vocabulary. I mean, glaciers don't just move slow, they move imperceptibly slow.
Right.
It conveys not just slowness, but painful, wearisome immobility, and they articulate the precise consequence of that. The second act really dragged, and it demanded a lot of patience from the audience without offering much of a payoff. The critique is tied directly back to the audience's investment of their time and their attention.
And then all of that specific criticism gets wrapped up in one concise, devastating critical phrase: style over substance.
That phrase is the definitive high-level judgment of a piece of art that didn't quite work. It means the technical skill, the beautiful cinematography, the style. It just couldn't compensate for the lack of narrative depth, the substance.
Let me challenge that a little bit. Is style over substance always a negative critique? I mean, some art is explicitly meant to be purely stylistic or aesthetic. Does using that phrase kind of shut down that nuance?
That's where the high-level communicator has to be careful. And that's a great point. In this specific case, because the speaker started by praising the style and then shifted to criticizing the substance, the narrative, the use of the phrase is justified. It confirms that imbalance.
Okay.
If the piece was, say, an experimental, non-narrative film, the phrase wouldn't really fit. But here, the expectation was for a story, and the story failed. And the final advice just reinforces that judgment. It didn't live up to the hype, and they tell their friend to wait until it hits streaming platforms.
Which confirms it wasn't worth the money or the time for a theater visit.
Exactly. This whole exchange is a model of how to be brutally honest while remaining intellectually fair.
Okay, our final major scenario takes us into the purely objective world of technical problem solving. Now, this might seem less emotional than what we just discussed, but when the stakes are work deadlines, precision is absolutely everything. Vague language costs time, money, and a lot of frustration.
Yeah, the goal of Scenario 16, the tech support call, is all about clarity under duress. The user needs to describe a persistent issue with their internet. And if they just call up and say, "My internet sucks," they're going to waste the first 10 minutes of the call.
So the user leads with the absolutely essential vocabulary of instability. They say the connection is intermittent. That one technical term immediately defines the failure mode for the support agent.
It does. It tells them it's failing periodically, not constantly, which probably rules out a major hardware failure and points more towards stability issues.
The support agent, in turn, uses precise diagnostic language to try and isolate the problem. They ask, is it dropping out completely or is it just lagging? And the user clarifies, saying the speed is fluctuating.
Fluctuating. That's a key word here. It implies speed variability. And then they quantify the consequence of that in a practical way. They translate the technical failure into a real business problem. The speed moves from optimal to a slow crawl, which makes video conferencing a specific, crucial activity virtually impossible.
And that is such a critical skill, translating a technical symptom into a real-world impact. They aren't just reporting a number on a speed test, they're reporting that they can't do their job. And that justifies the urgency.
It does.
What's really crucial here for you, the listener, is that the user then demonstrates their own competence by detailing all the standard fixes they've already tried. They list them off. Power cycling a modem, rebooted the router twice, and cleared my cache.
This is an enormous soft skill in this context, and some people might worry that listing those steps sounds arrogant, like they're trying to prove they're smarter than the tech agent.
Yeah, I could see that.
But why is listing those steps in this context actually a sign of respect, not arrogance? Well, I think it's about efficiency. By preemptively covering the basics, the user is signaling to the agent that they respect their time. They're allowing the agent to skip the first 10 standard questions on their script and move immediately to the next tier of diagnostics.
Exactly. It speeds up the resolution for everyone. It's conversational efficiency built on technical competence. It tells the agent, okay, we're dealing with a non-standard problem here. And that immediately moves the conversation into the escalation protocol.
So the agent runs a diagnostic, they identify signal interference in your area, and they determine the necessary next step. They need to escalate this to a Tier 2 technician.
And the user, who has this professional pressure point, I have a deadline today. They need to press for a turnaround time. This is a moment of polite negotiation. They need information. So the agent responds by marking the ticket as high priority and estimating a response time. Notice the language. They're escalating due to the severity and promising a resolution within the hour. And that polite conclusion is non-negotiable, even when you're under pressure. Diplomacy is still essential. The user says, "I'd appreciate that immensely, thank you." Precision, mixed with politeness, ensures cooperation.
So if we synthesize all the lessons from these scenarios, the debate, the error, the emotional support, the critique, and the tech call, the fundamental conclusion is that linguistic mastery really hinges entirely on soft skills.
Yeah.
We're moving beyond just transmitting facts to the strategic management of social friction and an emotional connection.
Absolutely. I mean, the sources just confirmed that language proficiency isn't about avoiding grammar mistakes. It's about choosing the most effective and the most appropriate word for a specific emotional or professional context. If you can't deploy the right idiom or the right softening phrase, you risk sounding blunt or aggressive or just robotic. #tag specific language tools for disagreement, softening the blow.
Let's revisit the tools for disagreement and consequence from those first two scenarios. The core lesson there is never to lead with an attack on the other person's position.
We saw how effective those balancing phrases were. Things like, "I'm inclined to agree, but," or that expert maneuver, "allow me to play devil's advocate." These are conversation extenders, not conversation killers.
And let's remember the psychological function of playing devil's advocate. It shifts the responsibility for the difficult point away from your own personal conviction. Compare that to just saying, "You're wrong."
Right. One invites discussion, the other just invites defense.
The advanced speaker is always trying to understand the whole picture before they move to persuasion.
We also saw those escalation tools. The strong, idiomatic language of consequence, describing pushback that causes retention rates to plummet, and that ultimate idiom of conviction. It's a hill many people are willing to die on. That shows a mastery over the language of impact and risk.
And in the error scenario, the language of accountability, using complete oversight and inadvertently, not to make excuses, but to demonstrate professional ownership and a commitment to fixing it. And the supervisor's de-escalation phrase, "while these things happen," acts as this precise mechanism to refocus from blame to solution. #tag specific language tools for emotional connection, acknowledging pain.
Now, you contrast that professional tax with the emotional depth required in that heart-to-heart scenario. Softening the blow in a personal setting is all about validating suffering, not just protecting egos.
Yeah, the phrases there move so far beyond generic comfort. We saw the power of acknowledging specific, complex pain, recognizing that the situation had reached a breaking point and that the loss was captured by that difficult truth of a bitter pill to swallow.
The most profound tool, though, the one that showed true empathy, was recognizing that the friend was grieving the future you thought you had.
Yeah.
That shifts the whole focus from the pain of the past to the shock of a lost trajectory.
And the resilience metaphors "you will weather this storm," they suggest that the pain is temporary and survival is assured. And that offer to just sit in silence. I mean, that is a hallmark of sophisticated, non-demanding support. It proves you understand that recovery isn't always an active process, especially at first.
And finally, even in that technical scenario, precision was the ultimate soft skill. Using intermittent and fluctuating instead of just vague complaints shows respect for the agent's time and expertise. And that respect makes a quicker, less stressful resolution possible.
When you can articulate a complex technical failure as precisely as you can articulate complex grief or complex critique, you're demonstrating true comprehensive control over the language. It bridges that gap between being a student of English and being a master of it.
It's about choosing the right strategic tool for the right communicative job. #tag outro. And that brings us to the close of this deep dive. We've covered 5 crucial areas that really define high-level communication mastery: professional debate, workplace clarification, notional support, cultural critique, and precise technical reporting.
These scenarios, all together, they highlight a reality that I think is really important. In a world that is just saturated with information and opinion, the most valuable skills are synthesis, diplomacy, and emotional intelligence. The challenge for you, the adept learner, isn't just knowing the dictionary definition of derivative or intermittent.
Right.
It's knowing the context, knowing when to transition from objective fact to subjective feeling, and why that strategic transition is what defines true conversational fluency.
We saw that professionalism isn't just about avoiding slang. It's about deploying precise, consequence-driven vocabulary and showing ownership and respect.
Now consider this final thought to take with you. All the scenarios we dissected relied on vocabulary related to consequence and compromise. So think about the other major interactions in your life. Negotiating a lease for an apartment, discussing a major financial investment with a partner, or even writing a nuanced testimonial for a colleague who's looking for a promotion. These complex human interactions demand the very same toolkit we dissected today. The ability to state your case firmly, but fairly, and always with an eye toward a shared solution, or just acknowledging a shared difficult truth.
Where in your day-to-day life do you need to stop just giving information and start actively playing devil's advocate or acknowledging a bitter pill to swallow? We hope this analysis gives you the grace and the precision to handle those moments expertly.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of advanced conversation.
We'll see you next time.